Hi, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Web Dev Room. Today we are working with something I try to teach every couple of years or so, Google Drive Forms, which is a really wonderful tool to work with. It works really well. It's really easy to set up. Let me also mention that the Google Forms plugin is no longer supported by WordPress, so I'm teaching this now so that you see that we have a fairly easy workaround for not using that plugin anymore. Just simply using it as a way to embed forms, simply embedding the forms onto the page. Before we move on, let me quickly show you my own page here. Here's a trend and needs survey. It's not currently up, but it was up for about a year in 2017 or so. It's just a simple questionnaire here and a submit button down here. It is well sized to the space here. And let me also point out, this is something that was brought up in people responding to my invitation to this webinar, that this also works really well with mobile devices too. So if I take this down to a mobile device type size, we can see that everything wraps around well and it works quite nicely. So these are forms, and there's a little trick to doing this, but these are forms that adapt themselves really well to mobile devices. And we'll discuss one little massage you need to make in the code before we, when we talk about that coding. Let's go back to our PowerPoint and continue. So what are Google Forms? Fairly obvious, but just to throw this out there really quickly, prior to Google Forms, web-based forms were always difficult. You needed a front-end form, then a back-end database, and then a way for those two things to communicate with each other. With Google, you're simply building the front-end form, and you're building the front-end form with a really easy to navigate, really intuitive, easy to work with interface. It will automatically create an Excel-like database. It's essentially Excel, though technically it's not. You can open it in Excel. You can export it as a CVS file and then import that CVS file into Excel and so on, or CSV rather. And it's right to the database as soon as that respondent clicks submit. And you can look at that database at any time. You're not going to be messing with it if you look at it or download a copy. It will not. The database that is being written to is not going to be interfered with if you do that. There are some other options out there. The infamously clanky Adobe Acrobat Forms. I know a lot of people in extension across the country use Acrobat. It's really clunky. It can be dealt with, but it's not easy. It's difficult to distribute. It's difficult to create the form in the first place. Microsoft OneDrive Excel Forms works pretty well. I wouldn't say it's quite on a par with Google, but they clearly built it with the intention of trying to replicate what Google Forms was doing, and they've done a pretty good job. And then JotForm and SurveyMonkey are good for really short surveys, like a contact form, but the free versions of those don't really offer much in terms of giving you many options as the form builder. So you build this in Google Drive, and there are two parts to it. There's the form itself, which you send out via a link, assumedly email. I suppose you can put that link on a web page as well, or you can embed it onto a web page, are the two main ways to distribute the form. The embed code width you need to make a tiny change to, rather than have it say 650 pixels wide, change it to 100% wide, and that should solve all your problems in terms of compatibility with mobile devices. And we'll do that in a few minutes here. So that's the first bit, the form. And in Google Drive, this is what that looks like. It's got the little icon here for the form, and then evaluation for 2018 Boulder WordPress Workshop in this case. And then the spreadsheet itself. The spreadsheet looks like this in Drive. That looks like a little gift-wrapped gift, but in actuality, it's a icon for Excel with rows and columns. So it's an Excel-like spreadsheet in that it's technically not an Excel sheet because Microsoft makes Excel. But for all practical purposes, it works like an Excel sheet. You can look at it while the survey's live. You can export the report at any time without messing with the actual Excel database that people are writing to. You can also see a visual representation of the data from the spreadsheet by going to Form and Show Summary of Responses. So you don't need to try to tease out what your answers are by looking at the rows and columns of an Excel spreadsheet. Google Drive and Google Forms specifically will automatically create what it finds to be the best graph for your data and show it to you in that manner. So, yeah, I'll go one more slide, then we'll go in there. No, let's not. Let's first go into Google Drive and get a sense of what all this looks like. So here's my Google Drive. And if we look down here, we can see that these are the, I made a screenshot of these 2 bits of the survey, evaluation for 2018 Boulder Workshop, and then the responses, and then the actual form itself. If I double click the form, here it is. It's very simple. The email address, we'll look at this in just a second when we build a form. This is in settings, this will be default, your first question, requiring an email address from that respondent. You can disable this by changing settings, and we'll look at that in just a bit. Here's a linear 1 to 5 scale, a couple of multiple choice questions, and then 4 open-ended questions. So that's what the form looks like. I talked about the visual representation of how you see the form. So we'll look at a couple different ways to look at this information. But one quick way is that if you, the originator of the form, are looking at the form, all you need to do is go to Responses, and you'll see a summary of what happened. You'll see each email address involved. You will see either via bar charts or pie charts, you will see the answers that your respondents have given. And then if you have open-ended questions, such as these last 4, you'll see the actual text being used on all these questions. Excuse me, I have to let a cat out of the room. Bear with me just a second. There you go. My apologies for that interruption. So let's continue. So that's the respondent. Those are the responses and the visual response. You can also get to this from the Excel-like form as well. And then here are the questions, and that's the original form. So with that said, let's go back to our PowerPoint and start to build a form for you. If you have any questions, please use the chat pod there. So getting started, you go to Google Drive, go to New, go to More, go to Google Forms. You don't really need to change the logo on the page. It tends to come out really, really low resolution to the point where I don't think it's a very good, it doesn't look very good visually. So all I would do is change the header to CSU green. There's the hex code for CSU green. Hex code is simply a way of how computers can define a color using 6 values. So we'll do that in a couple of seconds. And then you put that hex code under customize theme, theme color, and then plus, and add that in there then. You only have, I think, 4 choices of font in Google Forms, and you don't really want to change the font because the other ones are Comic Sans-like or script-like and so on. We'll look at those in just a second. You need to put in the title, the description. It will be pre-populated with that email address we saw at the very beginning, that required question with the asterisk to let the end user know it's required. It's easy to take that off simply by going to Settings and unchecking Collect Email Addresses. So that's how to get started. So let's go ahead and get started. I will jump again into my main screen, and we'll go to Google Drive. We'll then go to New, go to More, and then go to Google Forms. So here's what we start with. I'm just going to call this webinar form. And then the form description, well, I should spell form correctly there. The description of the form is where you can give, I'm not going to write much in here. It's where you give that end user just a little bit of explanation as to why you'd like them to fill out the form and the instructions you might want to give them. You have Untitled Form up here in the upper left-hand corner, but if you click into that box, it's going to take over the and pre-populate with whatever title you gave the form down here. So we have our title, we have our description. Let's quickly change this color. We're going to go to Customize Theme. We're not going to choose an image because, again, the results are really, really low res when you do that. To add CSU green, you go to the plus, you go to right here. You don't keep that pound mark there, but then you put in 00674E, which is CSU green, and then you add it. And this changes to green. I am colorblind, but one assumes that is CSU green. The font styles I was talking about earlier, again, you have you only have 4 options here. And the only one that's really good for these forms is basic, in my own opinion. So I'll get rid of theme options and we'll continue. So this first question here, email address, shows up by default. This is always there. The asterisk lets that end user know that's a required question. And if you want to take this off, or if you want to perhaps make it a non-required question and simply put it in there, you can go to Change Settings and turn off Collect Email Addresses. I'm going to leave this on, and I'm going to allow them, if they request it, to get a receipt. We'll look at the rest of these settings in just a little bit, but we'll use this email address as our first question. To get the next question, we have Untitled Question down here, so we'll simply click on that. The question itself goes right here, and then your options are down below. So I'll go ahead and do this. Was the webinar helpful? And then we'll make this a multiple choice question with yes and no. If you would like to add an other, that's a nice little bit that Google Forms gives you. If you choose the other option, it will not only give them the other option, but it will give them a little space to write in what their other choice would be. And it lists off those open-ended answers for you when you look at the responses to the form. Right now, I think we'll stop with this question and go back to our PowerPoint real quick. And we'll talk a little bit more about what you do next. So we saw this drop down a little bit at the beginning. These are all the question choices, as well as a couple of other things as well. Short answers, paragraph length answers, multiple choice, check boxes, which you can use more than one answer, drop downs, which are a single choice, but they drop down in a list rather than it being a multiple choice question. You can have them use file uploads here. The file uploads will go to your own Drive account or the owner of the form's Drive account. You can limit the type of file types that are sent to that Drive account. You can also limit the number of files that they upload to that account. Linear scale we saw already, say a 1 to 5 scale laid out along a line. Multiple choice grid and checkbox grid are just multiple choice questions or checkbox questions where there's several of them with the same format, so they come in a grid rather than one question at a time. And then finally, you can have the end user put in a date or a time. Now, to the right of all your questions, whether you have this question type drop down up or not, is this smaller toolbar here. The plus adds a question. These T's add a title description. This icon adds a picture. This icon adds a video. You can use a YouTube URL for the video. And then this final one here is adding a section. And we'll be working with quite a few sections today. So let's go back. Let's actually go one more slide into this, and then we'll return. Because we're going to be working with skip patterns today. This customizes the flow of questions based on the previous answers by that respondent. The easiest way to do this, and we'll do this next, is to set up all your questions and your sections. And when I say sections, I'm primarily talking about page breaks. Set those all up first, then go back and set your skip patterns. It's a good idea to require the questions you're basing your skip patterns on so that we know that we have an answer to work from there. The way to make a question influence future questions or future questions being asked of that respondent is go to the three dots in the lower right-hand corner and then choose right over here, go to section based on answer. So there's two things to do when you're building a skip pattern into a form. You do what we just talked about, the go to section based on answer command, and that will set you up with a path for that respondent to take dependent upon their answer. Then you also have to give the end of each section a choice about where to go next. So you're setting up a skip pattern in the question answers itself, and you're also setting up the skip pattern at the end of each section. And again, the easiest way to do this is to build everything first, get it all in the proper spots, then go back and set up all your skip patterns. So with all that said, let's build a quick 5-question survey that depends upon that first was the webinar helpful question that we've already added. So I'll go back to our main screen. Again, if you have any questions, please use the chat pod. So here we are with our first question already built. Was this webinar helpful? We next want a page break or add a section. We're going to call this page 2. It might be helpful for you, at least at the beginning while you're building the form, to put in what the answer choice was so it's easier to figure out what you're doing. So this will be the question that comes for, was the webinar helpful? Yes. And I can delete this yes at any point. So this section's done, or the section header is done. We'll then add a question. And this question will be, why was the webinar helpful? Notice it has already figured out, I think because of the word why, that this is a paragraph based question, which it is. We want our answer to be in paragraph form. So this is our only question in section 2. We'll then add another section. We'll call this page 3. And then we will temporarily give it a no so we can remind ourselves what's going on. We'll then add a question. And we'll say, why was the webinar unhelpful? And it again figures out that they want the paragraph formatting for this question, which is correct. I'm sorry. One thing I did not do was go to this question and make it required. This is how you make your question required in the lower right-hand corner. So we're going to add one more section. Oops, I didn't want it there. So I'm going to delete that section. I'm going to move down here into this question, and now I'm going to add that section, and we'll call this page 4. And then again, that temporarily all to let us know where we're at. Add question, and we'll add, are there any other suggestions or comments you'd like to make? It also figures out, rightly so, that this is a paragraph. And this is our questionnaire. Email address, was it helpful? Yes answers get why was it helpful? No answers get why was it unhelpful? Everybody gets, are there any other questions, suggestions, or comments you'd like to make? So now that we have the form built, let's put in our actual skip patterns. So we're going to go back to this question. I'm simply clicking inside the question to get this dialog box back. We're going to go down here to the lower right-hand corner and choose go to section based on answer. And when I do that, these two options appear. We want yeses to go to the next section, and we want our no's to go to section 3 or page 3, no. This we don't need to worry about because we're already throwing our no's to section 3 so we can have section 1 continue to the next section. Anybody who answers yes is going to automatically skip section 3. So after section 2, we'll set this skip pattern to all. So anybody who answers this second question will then go to section 4. Page 3, the no's will go to the next section because the next section is all. And there we have it. So let's see if we did this right. If we go to the eyeball, that gives us the preview. Email address, I'll put in s@gmail.com. Was it helpful? We'll click yes. We'll click next. We get our yes question. Put in some letters here. We'll click next. And we get our final question, which should be asked of everybody. So the yes path worked correctly. We'll next look at the no path. I'll submit this. And then this is what they get after a submission. Your response has been recorded is the default text there. I'll show you how to change this in just a bit. And then the submit another response option I'll use right now, but I'll show you in a little bit how to take this away and how to give them some other options as well. So I'll click submit another response to see if the no path is working. I'll use the same email address. This time we'll say it was not helpful. We'll click next. Why was the webinar unhelpful? So this did work correctly. We'll give it some random letters and numbers there. We'll click next, and then here's our final answer. Send me a copy of my responses. You can have them turn on or on. You don't have a choice as to whether they get this or not. We'll click submit. And so our form appears to work pretty well. I'm going to go back to the form itself. I'm going to get rid of this. Now we're back to our original form. We can see that we have 2 responses already. So the last thing I'll do is that now that we've set up our forms, I'll take the yeses and the nos out of our header titles, our section titles. And that's how to build a simple skip pattern. Again, if you have questions, use the chat pod. This saves automatically, by the way, so you don't need to click save at any point. Let's go to our PowerPoint. Let's talk about settings. So there are general settings where you can allow the option of collecting email addresses, and whether that's a required question or not. You can require a sign-in and limit responses that way. I don't recommend doing that because not everybody has a Google account. You can allow them to edit after their submission and see a summary of those submissions. We also work with presentation. Under settings, you can give them a progress bar. You can shuffle the questions, or you can link to submit another response. We just use that option ourselves. You can give them a confirmation message as well, or manipulate the existing confirmation message. And then finally, you can turn it into a quiz if you want to assign point values and allow auto grading. So with all that said, let's actually look at the settings, and then we will talk about how to share this, and we'll go from there. So here is our survey again. Here is that familiar settings cog. So under general, this is that first question, the one that always shows up by response. In general, it's a pretty good idea to collect email addresses. You certainly don't have to. If you want to turn this question off, then you simply uncheck the email option. You can limit them to 1 response, but that does require a sign-in, so I wouldn't recommend doing this unless you are absolutely sure that every respondent involved in the survey has a Google address and a way to easily sign into Google. I would tend to skip this unless it's really important to you. You can allow them to edit after their submission. You can also allow them to see summary charts and text responses after submission. So we'll allow them to edit, we'll allow them the summary, and we're not going to limit them to 1 response simply because of that sign-in issue. Presentation is next. You can show them a progress bar if you want them to see how far they are along in the survey. With a 5-question survey, that doesn't seem too important, but we can put it in there so you can see what it looks like. Shuffling the question order, we're not going to do. That can be a useful function. Personally, I think that would be a much more useful function if you could limit which questions you're shuffling, so you're not shuffling the entire survey. So I'm going to leave this off, and I'm also going to leave off the showing the link to submit another response because we want them to submit one only. Confirmation message, we saw the default one. Your response has been recorded. I'll add something quick and easy here. Thank you so much for your response. I spelled everything correctly there. And then if you want to work with quizzes, you can make the whole thing a quiz. You can have them release the grade immediately after submission, or you can manually review them themselves. You can allow them the options, or you are allowed the options of letting the respondent see missed questions, correct answers, and point values. We're not going to make this a quiz, but we'll keep our general and presentation choices we made and click Save. This will be slightly different on this go-around, though not much, but I'll quickly show you what we've got here. Again, the eyeball is the preview. So the email address, which is required. Was it helpful? Here is our progress bar right here. And if you're working with several sections, a progress bar, even for a survey this short, is probably a reasonable thing to give them so they know how long the survey takes and what they're getting into. I'll click No. I'll click Next. We'll put in some fake stuff. Here is our progress bar. We'll click Next. Here's our final question. This allows them to see a copy of the responses. This shows them they're done. We submit. This is our new confirmation note. Thank you so much for your response. Allows them here to see previous responses so we can see on a bar graph how other people have answered. And they can also go back and edit their responses. And if they edit their skip, if they change this helpful from no to a yes, it will pick that up and follow the correct skip pattern and submit it that way. Again, if you have questions, use the chat pod. Otherwise, I'll go back to our final little bit here and we'll call it a day. And that is how to share this survey. The distributing the form, there's a big button there in the upper right-hand corner that clicks Send. You get several options when you click Send. You can send via email, via Google's email, provide addresses, a subject line, and a message. Everybody gets it. You can grab the link from Google Forms, from Google Drive, and then send that link yourself using a native program such as Outlook, I assume you would use if you're a CSU Extension employee, or you can also put that link on a web page. You can also embed that link into a web page, which is what we're doing today. It's going to ask you to put in a width and a height. You can change those numbers manually in the code after you embed it. Sometimes it takes a few tries to get it right. And again, you want to set your width at 100% in order to assure that mobile devices will see this. So we're going to have to grab the code, then we're going to have to manipulate the code a little bit. So let's go back one last time to Google Forms. I'll get rid of this preview form. Here is our webinar form. There's that giant send button. I guess giant's a little strong. So if you want Google, if you want to send out the email link to using Google, you may. You put in all your email addresses in here. That's the subject line. This is pre-populated. You can put in whatever you like there. The message is also pre-populated, but you can put in your own message there as well. I would recommend not including the form in the email because you don't know what that native email system that end user is going to have. And if you keep this unchecked, what it does is it gives them a little button, which is simply a link to the form, which is a lot less likely to mess up. So this is how to have Google send out the email. I assume you would be using not Google, but your own Outlook account, in which case you would click the second option. Here's the link you would need to send out. You can shorten it using this option if you like. And rather obviously, you can also put this link on a web page if you want them to click the link to get to the form. And then finally, you can embed it yourself. Here is the code, the width that you want to put in, the height that you want to put in. Well, 640 is a good width for a desktop WordPress that will be insufficient for our needs because a lot of people are looking at these WordPress sites using mobile devices such as phones or tablets. We'll set our height at 1200 and we'll keep that width at 640, but be aware we're going to have to change that. We're going to click copy, and then we're going to go into WordPress. So here's my WordPress site. I'll go to my dashboard. Bear with me, we appear to be running a little slow today. I'll go to Pages, and I'll go to Add New. We'll call this page Webinar Form. And then we already have that code in our clipboard. So I will right-click and paste. And here's the only part we have to worry about, the width and height. I think that height of 1200 is going to work out fine. The width, if you just put in a number, it's going to assume that those are pixels. However, if I put it 100 followed by a percentage sign, it's going to take up 100% of the width it's been given. So it's not going to take 100% of the whole page because you do have that right side column for widgets to worry about, but it will take up the 100% of the section of the page it's been given. So we'll click Publish. And we'll wait. Again, if you have any questions, please use the chat pod. We now have a form, so we'll go to the URL over here, the permalink, and click that. And here is our form. Notice that 100% did not impinge on our right column full of widgets. I don't think we need to go through the form one more time, although I believe the 1200 pixels height is working well. And finally, we'll put this into a phone-like resolution and see that the form is displaying properly. Just to make sure, we'll go through it as if it were a form. Everything seems to be working so far, and we'll submit it. So it works well as a desktop survey or as a form. And if there are no more questions, I think that's the end of this survey. That's how to work with Google Forms and Google Drive. Again, the key thing here is to remember you've got to manually change the width of the form to 100% in order for this to work with mobile devices such as phones or tablets. Thank you all very much. Have a good day, and we'll see you soon.